Stranraer in southwest Scotland, a community hard hit by a killer disease. Till recently, statistics in this area were among the worst in the world for heart disease. Nearly every family had been touched by tragedy, with 4 deaths a week from heart attack. Perched on the remote Galloway Peninsula, it's a tiny and close-knit community. Most people live in the little town, which survives on the ferry links to Northern Ireland. A further 5,000 live in farming communities beyond. It's an unlikely setting for a story of frontier medicine, but in 3 years, deaths in this area have been cut by half through the combined efforts of doctors and community. This film is about heart attack and the special approach which is saving lives in Stranraer. It could save thousands more in the rest of Britain. First, we'll meet some of the faces behind the statistics. At the P&O terminal, John Sproat, ferry clerk. His heart attack came out of the blue.
Got up as usual to go to work. Left the house about 25 to 6. And I took this terrible pain in my chest. I come back in the house and got my wife to phone the office to say that I wouldn't be out just at that time. And it started to get worse. So she phoned the doctor, and within 15 minutes she was in the house. 5 minutes later I was away to hospital. And when I got to Garrick Hospital, I walked into hospital with Dr. Gordon. And he just asked me to take my shirt off and sit up in the casualty table. And asked one of the nurses, the night nurses, to do an ECG. And that's all I remember. I was just blacked out from that on. When I didn't know that my heart had stopped until I was moved from the Garrick Hospital on the Tuesday. There had never ever been heart disease in the family. No one in our family has ever had heart disease. Hadn't had any blood pressure. Wasn't overweight. I worked long hours. I worked maybe excessive overtime. I was also shop steward at work, and I was involved in the boys' football league in the summertime. So maybe all these combined put some pressure on me and caused the problem.
Park Primary School in Stranraer. The headmaster, Ian Clark, is our second survivor.
Good afternoon, girls and boys.
Good afternoon, Mr. Clark.
I wonder if you could just stop for a moment. I've got 2 things to say. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the 5 people in the class who have been chosen for the It's a Knockout competition. Lindsay, Kay, Michelle, Ross and Alan. And that's at Agnew Park for the heats on Monday at 4:15 p.m. And one other piece of good news, the infants are going to be holding a bring and buy sale at the beginning of next week. And we're looking for some seniors to help out. Now, it's purely for the infant department, but we're looking for some responsible seniors to help. Right, now I'd just like to carry on, and I want to come around to see how things are going, okay? Thank you. I've had 2 heart attacks. The first one in 1982, exactly at the time of the Falkland War. And I was in the most relaxed position I think you can possibly be. I'd had breakfast in bed. It was the first day of my Easter holidays. Nona had brought me breakfast in bed. And I then suddenly started to feel quite severe pain, very high up, across my shoulders rather than anywhere else. And I really couldn't understand this. And I got up, got dressed, came down, and found the pain was really getting worse and worse. So I told Nona, I think I went back to bed. And she got in touch with the doctor.
We'd had a strong argument the night before with the family, didn't we? Because Ian was all for the Falklands War and we were all against it. And, the family was. And the next morning, of course, he had his heart attack and we all thought, was it us? What done it? But,
I think
it's your lifestyle.
Yes, I really think a misspent youth and early middle age might have much more to do with it than the Falklands conflict, actually.
And out of town, sheep farmer Stuart McCaig. He survived a second attack, thanks, he feels, to his GP's care.
And of course, the doctor came very quickly, but it seemed an age. And when he did arrive, of course, it's a wonderful calming effect. Here is the doctor. Not only is here as the doctor, but from the heart attack previously, I knew that in his little black bag, he would have the pills or the injection. And I can well remember saying to him, "Doctor, do you think I'm going to die?" And he said, "Not if I can help it." And he said it, even the Almighty must have taken notice. You know, he really meant it.
Next we meet a local doctor. All three patients feel they owe their lives to his pioneering treatment. Ian Gordon brought to Stranraer a drug for heart attack victims, well known and well tested, but underused in Britain.
We've treated 77 cases, and the results in individual patients have been quite dramatic, with people who've been collapsed, low blood pressures, really very ill, responding dramatically. And I think we're seeing that because we are in a position to give the drug at a very early stage in the evolution of a heart attack.
Special treatment is made possible by the special nature of medical care in Stranraer, where GPs also staff the local hospital. It's this approach which first drew Ian Gordon to the area.
The main difference here is that the doctors look after their own patients at home, as in the rest of the country, but if they have a problem requiring hospital admission, they arrange the admission, they look after their own patients while they're in hospital, they arrange all the tests, they see them each day, and they discharge them home into the community. They then look after them and make arrangements for the various backups and care that should be provided there. I spent 3 years in hospital medicine before I came here, and I think I reached a stage whereby I'd sat for the exams. I had to decide, was I going to go on in hospital medicine or was I going to go into general practice? And I was really very lucky because this practice was advertised and it just had what I was looking for, which was a combination of hospital medicine and general practice. A method whereby you could look after your own patients as a family physician and yet follow them into hospital, use the knowledge and expertise that you'd gained in hospital training, and then look after them back again in the community. Morning, Annie.
Morning, Doctor. I'm in the sitting room.
Okay. Hello, Annie.
Oh,
How are you doing?
Not so bad. How's
Good.
yourself?
Oh, well, been worse, you know. Right, Annie, how are the joints doing?
Oh, still very painful.
Are they?
Still very painful.
Right.
Some days worse than others.
Aye. Are you managing to sleep?
Yes, yes.
Your ankles, are you still having a bit of trouble there?
Not so much. It's up here, Doctor, that the pain actually is.
The swelling's certainly gone down from
Yes.
last time.
Yes.
Okay. Anything you wanted to ask me about? Is there any other new symptoms or anything?
No. If I had a new pair of legs, I'd be fine.
They're in short supply, I'm afraid.
Gordon's interest in hospital medicine as well as general practice led him to a drug called streptokinase. It dissolves the clot that causes an attack. He learned at a conference that drugs like this could cut deaths by up to 30%.
And it was interesting, at the end of the meeting, Dr. Celia Oakley from London asked those who were there, and the majority of them were hospital consultants, senior registrars, how many were already using this treatment, and perhaps a dozen hands went up out of 300 people. And then she said, having heard all the information presented to you today, how many of you are going to go home and start using this? And I'm a little disappointed to say that perhaps only a third put their hands up. Now, it seemed to me that given the situation we have in Stranraer, being 80 miles from our district general hospital, and because the general practitioners run the local hospital here, and because of the high incidence of heart attacks, we really should be looking at this carefully and deciding what we should be doing best for our patients.
He withdrew from the team a couple of months ago. because he wasn't eating the right food. And then when he got back into the team, he was made the captain.
Right, and you think this was because he changed his diet, did he?
Yes.
Did it tempt you to change your diet?
Yep.
Right, what have you dropped out of it?
I'm not eating that much chocolate now.
And eating out
One of the first guinea pigs was Ian Clark, who suffered a second attack alone at home.
I tried to kid myself that it was physical, and I did some physical things to see if, well, if you call cleaning out the fire physical and washing the dishes, but anyway, I did these things and the pain was still there. And I must say I did approach the telephone twice before I phoned, and when I phoned, it so happened my own doctor, Dr. Grieve, was on an emergency call, was here within 10 minutes, sounded me and said, yeah, I think we wanted to take you up and do tests. Left a note for Nona, who expected me to be out when she arrived back, and went up to the hospital, this time in the doctor's car.
It was a bit alarming, you know, in retrospect, because Ian had said he might go out along to the rugby club before I came back. So when I came back, it was just as I expected. Ian was out, and it took me a wee while to discover the note by the telephone saying, I've gone to hospital, think it might be a heart attack, you know, which was which put me into a panic. Anyway, I rushed up straight away and met Dr. Grieve, who is our doctor, and he said he was pretty sure it was a heart attack. He thought the indications would be to administer streptokinase, and this hadn't been done the first time, and I didn't know what this entailed. And he said someone would have to sign the permission form. So of course I said, well, is it an experiment? He said, no, it's past the experimental stage, but a permission must be signed. To me, he looked a bit nervous, and I said, I don't really want to sign that. I said, can Ian sign it himself? And he said, well, yes, he can. He said, why, Ian? I said, well, he trusts his doctors. So Ian signed it.
I believe in doctors, and I think that's the only way it can be. And it was given immediately on a drip, and it really didn't cause any inconvenience or anything as far as I was concerned. And I would think speeded my recovery, because certainly by comparison with the previous attack, I did make a very much faster recovery. I suppose there are difference in severity of attacks. I don't know about that, but certainly I found my recovery was speeded. No, I had no pain at all after arrival in hospital and started getting the drug. I felt fine.
I think that we're in a situation here because we've been using this medicine now for over 2.5 years, and we have experienced the dramatic benefit when it's given very early to patients. We have had patients treated within 1 hour, and from being moribund, collapsed, pale, sweating with an almost unrecordable blood pressure, and a proven diagnosis on their cardiograph, within an hour these people have a normal blood pressure, sitting up, well perfused, happy, smiling, and pain-free.
So Ian Gordon feels the drug has lived up to his expectations. But do other Stranraer doctors share his enthusiasm? Ian Gordon shares a busy group practice with 15 other GPs who divide their time between the health centre and the Garrick Hospital. Care of patients is a matter for the group, as is the introduction of any new treatment.
Eventually I decided it really wasn't possible to tell whether she'd had an MI or not.
It gives you plenty of time to think out what your next response is going to be. So
they viewed streptokinase with mixed feelings. It can have side effects, so though all now use it within the hospital, they take a cautious approach.
Although I decided not to give her streptokinase, not in view of her age or any other medical contraindication, but really just because I didn't think that she had had an MI.
We are very well aware of the dangers of using streptokinase, particularly out with the setting of a major hospital. Streptokinase thins the blood and will make the patient very much at risk for the complications of bleeding. There are many causes of chest pain, of which coronary heart disease is only one, and the dangers of using streptokinase when the
cause of the chest pain is not coronary heart disease are indeed very risky.
I think the one thing that we have seen, or I have seen, is a sudden drop of blood pressure after starting the streptokinase, and that has really been quite alarming, particularly in the context of a person who's had a myocardial infarct anyway, and possibly that's the thing that has worried me most. In point of fact, it doesn't matter that much, because by stopping the streptokinase you're able to reverse this quite promptly. But the first time I saw it, I really felt very alarmed about what was happening.
At the present time, it is reckoned that 30,000 people per year are being treated. The potential is to double that, in which case you're talking about saving possibly 10 to 12,000 lives a year. It may even be more if the drug can be given earlier, whether by general practitioner, trained ambulance men, or mobile coronary care units.
In the more remote corners of his GP practice and far from hospital backup, Gordon has put himself on the line by giving streptokinase to patients at home. So convinced is he of the need for early treatment. Willie Spears was the first to have treatment started in his own bed, though diagnosis was uncertain.
Oh, I felt really ill, you know. It wasn't on my chest. It didn't affect me there. It was down here in the ribs, you know. And I feel just as somebody was crushing me, you know. That's the feeling I had.
I got the call on a Monday evening after tea time, and the story was he'd had chest pain for an hour. It sounded very significant. He was obviously distressed, and it took me 15 minutes or so to get there. I decided, without an ECG, which is a contentious point perhaps, but it seemed to me that he was classically having a heart attack. And I set up the drip. He was given streptokinase. And I may say I can fully recollect the apprehension and the worry and the concern of it all, because streptokinase is being billed as having these side effects, concerns that might give rise to bleeding and this kind of thing. The infusion was continued throughout the ambulance journey, and when he got into the hospital, his ECG was done and it confirmed he was having a heart attack. I hung about the hospital for a few hours, watching and waiting and in concern that there might be a problem. There were no problems. His blood pressure came up, his ECG changes disappeared, and he did exceptionally well.
I said to the doctor, I says, what do you think of me now, Doctor? Well, he says, you're all right, you know. He was visiting some of his own patients in the hospital, and I was sitting on the end of my bed there when he went past. I think they were amazed how quick I got better, you know.
So Ian Gordon's gamble with Willie Spears paid off. Did Willie and his sister know there was anything unusual about this treatment?
He did say that it was a new drug, but not to think that he was being made a guinea pig, you know, that he... But it'd been the first time it had been done in the home. Well, by Dr. Gordon, anyway.
I was only in a fortnight. They tried me out in the steps, you know, and up the stairs. They took me along the wheelchair and I just jumped out and I walked up and back down. No problem. So I says to myself, I can't be too bad. You know, you think a lot of these things to yourself, you know, when you've been through that kind of thing. You say, I wonder if it'll just be temporary or if that's me, but here I am today, answering your questions, eh?
But treating patients at home is a risky business. The diagnosis could be wrong. Stuart McCaig and his GP faced that dilemma when Stuart collapsed on his farm.
I rose about 6:30 with this violent pain and foolishly got up, dressed, went outside, and when I got to the gable end of the house, the wind hit me. The pain was so great I turned and came back, and my wife took me into the bedroom, got me to sit down, raced off and phoned the doctors.
I was called out one morning about 7 o'clock to see a patient of mine, Mr. McCaig, a retired farmer who I had been seeing for the last few years with angina. When I got there, I took a story and examined him, and it was clear in my mind that he was having an acute myocardial infarction at that time. I had the streptokinase with me, and having given him the pain relief, inquired whether he would mind if I started this at home.
And then he knelt in the bed and started to tell me about this drug that he wanted my permission for him to give me. And it was running through my head, what a way to run a railway. Here I am dying, and this man's talking about some drug, you see. And I said, certainly yes. I'd have said yes to sulfuric acid.
This gained a good half hour because I would be giving it personally once he got into the GP hospital, and I felt that we could manage to start it sooner and therefore get greater benefit from it.
I think that story is very interesting in that it illustrates the reason that I think has made a lot of us, and certainly has made me, very reluctant to start people at home. Rod knew his patient, he knew exactly what the story was, and he had an excellent chance that his clinical diagnosis at home was spot on and that streptokinase was indicated. I've never given streptokinase at home yet, and have always felt that the half hour that he saved was probably reasonably wasted with me getting the person into the casualty department and getting a good ECG tracing before I got started, for the very reason that you've been mentioning, and that is the risk of wrong diagnosis. And I'm still scared that I might give streptokinase to somebody who had maybe a dissecting aneurysm or something funny like that, and with disastrous results.
So that's the doctor's dilemma. Complications could be a danger when far from help, but treatment at home could save a life. Was Stuart McCaig afraid to say yes to the drug?
If one were to look back on it, you are in intense pain. Here is a man with an alternative. Now, I knew that the morphine or whatever it was I was injected with would allay the pain for a time. But having had a heart attack before, I knew when I woke up, the pain would still be with me. I mean, heaven knows what it's doing to your insides. But he was a man who explained to me that this was a new drug, and he was going to give me this. I had every faith in him, and it was out with hospital conditions, and I took the chance.
Since Ian Gordon brought the drug to Stranraer, such trust has been well rewarded. So far, there have been no mistakes. So shouldn't GPs in the rest of Britain follow their lead and save lives?
I think we'd be very slow indeed to criticise other doctors who are more sceptical about streptokinase. I think not every general practitioner enjoys the particular advantages we have in its use, our rapid access from home to hospital, and the technology we have available there to help us in diagnosis. Doctors, of course, are under a lot of pressures, particularly commercial pressures, to use a lot of new drugs. And if we all galloped off in every direction with every new fad that came along, the results would be quite disastrous. The profession is right to be conservative.
We asked Stranraer doctors to tell us how they had come to terms with the problems that worry GPs in the rest of Britain. Most said they usually feel confident of diagnosis.
But there is obviously some patients who have chest pain which maybe isn't typically from a coronary, and then you are faced with a dilemma, and sometimes you've got to say to yourself, well, if I was in this situation and I thought I might be having a heart attack, would I like to have streptokinase myself? And I suppose that's up to each individual practitioner to decide and weigh up the case on its merits.
Couldn't the problem be solved by using portable equipment to confirm an attack?
Yeah, well, we all carry defibrillators, so there doesn't seem any reasonable reason why we shouldn't be carrying ECGs as well. But so far, we're not that geared, all of us, because I don't carry a portable ECG, and I don't think many of us actually do we?
I think the important thing to point out is that the ECG may not show any changes for several hours after an infarction, so you may not be any further forward using an ECG.
I have actually given streptokinase, I'm sure all of us have as well, given a patient streptokinase when there have been no ECG changes, relying solely on the history and examination.
I feel that that doctors in other parts of the country, general practitioners, would require the backup of a consultant in hospital who would actively encourage them to use streptokinase. Otherwise, I feel that the general practitioners would feel vulnerable.
One of our great advantages here is that we are really in the back and beyond, and we're far enough away to be our own bosses. And I mean, I know it's not like that on paper actually, but in practice we have to make the decisions here, and I think we probably have a bit of a responsibility, seeing as how Ian Gordon has brought it onto our doorstep, to establish a place for it and to show that general practitioners, wherever they are, can usefully be using this drug.
I think streptokinase can be likened to the introduction of antibiotics in the infectious diseases era. Prior to the introduction of penicillin in the 1950s, I think, a lot of patients died from infectious disease. They either got better on their own or they died. Introduction of antibiotics revolutionized all of that. And really, it's very similar to streptokinase and coronary artery disease. Coronary artery disease kills 1 person in 4 in this country. Approximately 250,000 people a year die from coronary artery disease. Streptokinase can reduce that in suitable patients by anything up to 50%, and it may even be more the earlier the drug is given. The similarities to the treatment in infectious diseases extends further. The earlier you treat with an antibiotic, the better the response. The more severe the infection, the better the response. And it's very similar with streptokinase. The earlier you treat, the more effective it is. The more severely ill the patient is, the greater the assault on their heart, the more benefit they will gain. And this seems to me to be an outstanding innovation in the treatment of what is just a horrendous disease.
recovered from his heart attack, Headmaster Ian Clark has returned to his other job as local radio arts correspondent.
Okay, Willie? Yes. Right. Festival Overture by Shostakovich opened the concert given in Newton Stewart by the Galloway Chamber Orchestra, conducted by David Montgomery. But the central achievement was Mozart's Clarinet Concerto, in which soloist Colette Louis, a Liverpudlian but a graduate of the Royal Scottish Academy of Music, charmed and delighted a capacity audience in the Macmillan Hall. Just listen to the lyricism of this.
In this isolated community, there's a tradition of self-help, and local people are playing their part in the fight against death from heart attack. Without their involvement, drug treatment alone could not save lives.
It's a well-known fact that after a cardiac arrest, brain death occurs within 3 or 4 minutes, and there is never going to be a system where the professionals can attend within that short space of time.
If this were for real, he'd have 4 minutes left. In most parts of Britain, he'd have no chance. John Calvert devised a plan to bridge those 4 minutes, building on local first aid skill. Stranraer people already know how to deal with road traffic victims. They get plenty of practice in this notorious black spot. Calvert planned to teach ordinary people to treat heart attack. His idea was to recruit instructors under a government plan for the unemployed.
And it may be no coincidence that my next door neighbour happened to be the local manager for Manpower Services, and he and I were perhaps instrumental in getting together and hammering out a scheme whereby half a dozen young unemployed people could be taught both the skills of CPR and the teaching skills required to put the training across.
Mandy, now an ambulance driver, was one of the first 6 recruits.
Well, myself personally, I applied for the job for a number of reasons. One being that I had a member of my own family who had actually died through a heart-related disease. The other people that were on the scheme were all really the same. Nearly everybody had had someone in their family dying from heart-related disease. And in Dumfries and Galloway alone, there was 1,040 deaths in 1 year. So, I mean, the statistics were really alarming.
Now, may we have a volunteer for the recovery position? Pink, would you be our volunteer, please? Gentleman on the left. Yes, thank you. All right.
Their motto was they would go anywhere, anytime, to teach the public these life-saving skills.
Now, I'm going to talk Kathy through the recovery position. All right? She takes the hand furthest away and places it on the shoulder. If outside, it goes on to the cheek. She places her hand under his neck to support the head, and grabbing something tight around the waist, she rolls him over.
To begin with, you were nervous. People were nervous as well taking part. I mean, you had to really ask them. Word of mouth got about. A lot of people passed the message on to other people. I think really then they realised that 2 hours of their own free time could maybe save a member of their own family's life at some time. So, I mean, most people were really willing to participate.
So Lynn must breathe for Resuscian and beat her heart for her.
This much-travelled torso, Resuscian, is used to teach them what to do if the heart has stopped. First, they're shown how to get the patient breathing.
And tilts the head right back to clear the airway. She then pinches the nose and places her mouth directly over the casualty's mouth and breathes into her twice.
CPR means cardiopulmonary resuscitation. It's a skill that few GPs have been taught.
To see if she can stimulate the lungs.
The next step is to show them how to massage the heart back to life.
Over the heart. She places her other hand over the top and giving 15 downward jerking movements, either keeping her fingers straight or
We've been involved for about 2 or 3 years now. There was a training team who offered to come down and train our staff both ashore and afloat, and we grabbed the opportunity because I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us as a company and for the people themselves to be able to react quickly in an emergency, and of course they sometimes arise. We do it in company time because as far as I'm concerned, as a company, it's a great investment for us to have our staff trained, but it's also of great benefit to them personally.
The response was great. We obviously done it the first year it was running. I think it still runs yet. We done the likes of the whole workforces in creameries, Blarney Creamery, all the little shops around Newton Stewart. Nearly all the businesses were interested. It actually even snowballed from there to do people's families. Businessmen maybe got you in to do their families. We had trained the policemen in Newton Stewart who then got their wives to participate. We started doing house-to-house calls, which was really good because obviously it was like housewives. And I thought that was good that they were even thinking about it. It was just really snowballing, word of mouth got round and people asked you to go and train them at home.
7,000 people in this region have now been trained. That's 1 in 3 who can deal with sudden collapse. And these skills are being put to use.
While I was doing my training in Edinburgh, a friend and I were out one day shopping and a lady collapsed in one of the big stores in Princess Street, and we had to carry out our CPR techniques, which was quite strange being out of the hospital environment to have to do something like that. But we were very lucky because living in the middle of the city, the ambulance was there very quickly, which doesn't often happen if you're out in a rural area like we are here.
Obviously this is of benefit. If there's a collapse in the community, it's likely that there will be somebody to hand who has some experience and has been trained. And I have personal experience on 2 occasions of having had to deal with patients who've collapsed. One at a football match in the town, and the other one a man just walking along the street. And it's exceptionally difficult on your own to be doing external cardiac massage and doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And if you have somebody who's trained and knows what to do, who appears from the crowd round about, this is a tremendous asset.
It doesn't always work, unfortunately, and that's, you know, very sad in those circumstances. But I think if people are able to carry out their CPR techniques, then they know that they've done the best for that person. There's nothing worse than that feeling of helplessness, and to be able to go ahead and try and do something for the person makes, you know, the person who's carrying out the CPR feel slightly better.
Thank you.
How have you been?
Oh, not so bad.
That's good. Now, Dr. White would like me to take your blood pressure. Is that all right today?
Yes,
good.
Well.
And then I think Dr. White wants to see you after this. Is that all right?
Will.
What's happening on the farm these days?
Well, we're starting Saturday after tomorrow.
Good. You'll be hoping the weather keeps up then.
We certainly do.
Linda Foster has given up her work as a CPR instructor and is now a practice nurse at the Stranraer Health Centre, where she runs her own clinics.
Time consuming, but from the environmental point of view, it's the done thing now.
One of her jobs is to check heart patients like Stuart McCaig. Though trained as a nurse, Linda was unemployed when she joined the CPR scheme. It was set up and financed as a community programme, a government plan to create jobs for the unemployed. The boost to self-esteem helped many of her colleagues land better jobs, an extra spin-off to this life-saving scheme.
I like to think it was one of the best community programmes that has been promoted, because it gave these unemployed, largely young people, a real chance to promote themselves. They've nearly all gone on from the unemployment register to get good jobs, and I like to think that our scheme was very helpful to them in doing that. They certainly gave us very good service whilst they worked for us for their short spell.
I think the success of a scheme like this owes everything to the community. I mean, even as a company here, quite a large company, a large employer, we are very much part of that community, and we realise we have to play our part in that community. But I think the people of Stranraer are very supportive. There's been a lot of fundraising for various machines, etc., and they always give their wholehearted support to anything like that.
Now, this is the culmination of 18 months of work. It was a national campaign organised by the British Heart Foundation.
£30,000 has been raised as part of a campaign to equip Scottish ambulances with defibrillators. They're the latest breakthrough in coronary care.
Defibrillator for each of our 4 ambulances in this area. And as you all know, through our efforts and the efforts of all the people in this area, because we really have just pointed the way, they have done the work, that money has been raised in 18 months. So really, without more ado, I'm delighted, Bill, to give you this defibrillator. I know it's in good hands, and I know that you'll put it to very good use.
Okay, Ian, thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks to the efforts of the community, all ambulance crews now carry and use these life-saving machines. Training takes just 8 hours. CPR may get the heart going, but the victim could still die through ventricular fibrillation. The heart loses its steady beat and goes wild. The machine detects this and tells them when to give a shock to jolt the heart back to its normal rhythm.
Check. Stand clear.
The machine's now analysing
Stand
once again.
clear. Stand clear.
Shock.
Press to shock. Press
Clear.
to shock.
There's no shock indicated. We're checking for pulse. And we have the pulse. So therefore we can keep these leads on, use this machine as a monitor, and therefore by watching the screen we can determine what activity is going on within the heart.
Within days of receiving the first machine, they used it to save a life.
Well, one of the ambulance men and myself, Ian, who I was on with that night, did go to a collapse case in one of the local hotels. And I think this case in itself tells the story of the whole Heart Start campaign, because when we arrived, one of the general public was actually carrying out CPR at the scene. So it enabled us to go straight in with the defibrillator without doing so many other checks. And when we switched the monitor on, we had a shockable rhythm right away, which was very helpful at the time. And this was a successful defibrillation on arrival at the hospital.
Elsewhere in Britain, heart attack victims are not so lucky. Stranraer ambulance men and Sea-Link staff reenact an incident to show how public training combined with new technology can save life.
Hello there. Just carry on, please.
CPR in the first 4 minutes doubles his chance of survival.
Hello?
Hello, Graham, what happened? No, George. You're just walking towards the boat and you just went down like a ton of bricks.
His heart has started, but he could still die if the heart goes into spasm. Defibrillation trebles his chance of survival.
Stand clear. Stand clear.
Everybody stand clear.
Stand clear. Stand clear.
200 joules. Yep. First shot. First shot indicated. Check the pulse.
Yep, we have a pulse. Yep.
In Scotland, ambulance crews are now saving 30% of patients through the use of defibrillators.
All right, sir. How are you feeling just now? Fine, you're not too bad then. Are you in any pain? No.
With semi-automatic machines, training is easy. The machine tells ambulance men what to do. They can't go wrong.
Okay.
You feel better sitting up, eh?
The government has announced plans to equip all ambulances in England and Wales with defibrillators. But these will not be semi-automatic. They can only be used by paramedics after lengthy training.
as a medical man, I'm aware of a complete change in the scene over the last few years, from the former situation when one caught to a collapse or an incident of some kind. Invariably people were just standing around, the victim was lying there, nobody was doing anything effective. Nowadays, when attending somebody who's collapsed, nearly always effective CPR is being given, and of course this is particularly helpful because now our ambulances are all equipped with defibrillators, and the ambulance personnel are trained to use them, and at last we're giving the victims of heart attacks a real chance from the word go of getting the skilled attention that will make the breakthrough in coronary mortality.
Grateful patient John Sproat was in hospital when his heart stopped.
When I came out of hospital and went back to work, I said that once I got fit, I wanted to do something in return for heart patients at the local hospital. We'd got talking about various items that we wanted to do, like sponsored walks, sponsored cycle runs, and two of the lads, two dockers, they said that they were going to walk the Southern Upland Way, which is 220 miles.
This cross-country hike seemed a fitting way to raise funds for a computerised exercise machine.
So these two lads said that if I helped to raise the money, they would walk it, and that the money raised would go towards to start a fund for a treadmill.
It took us 9 days in total, so it was a hard 9 days.
I've averaged, I would say, 25 mile for 8 days and then finished off with 13 today, you see. So it was pretty hard, aye.
But worth it?
Worth it, aye, that's us finished.
What do you think about it, John?
I think it was very good, and the boys doing it for the treadmill. It was an exercise machine I needed when I was ill, and I can only thank them for starting the treadmill fund off.
I think we're very fortunate in Stranraer. I think we've got a very high level of medical care. And I think one of the most appealing things, though, the thing I've noticed most, is the way in which the general practitioners work as a group together to benefit everyone. But not just the doctors themselves, but everyone in the health centre, in the hospitals, and the community itself is very supportive of everything that goes on.
Well, you see, I think the doctors have got a rapport with the patients. It's very close, very intimate. You have a doctor comes at least 3 times a day. And in the hospital itself, everybody takes an interest in you. If you find at the end of the day that when matron comes round, and she does come round to say goodbye, she said goodbye to my friend first, and then it was my turn, I found myself like a small boy who had been to a party. I thanked her very much for having me, and I did enjoy my stay, you see. And one can't speak higher of an institution than that.
Yes, I think it has to do with the size of the community and perhaps the geographical location of the community, which gives it almost an island feel to it. I think it's also to do with the health centre, the sort of team effort you feel among the doctors and the doctors in relation to the hospital, so they follow their patients in. I think it's got to do with other things in the community too. I think it's got to do with the effort that the community makes in fundraising for all sorts of medical assistance and so on. I mean, there's scarcely a week that was passed in the local newspapers without being a photograph of some charity breaking a bottle in the bar, which has been where money has been collected for defibrillators or something else. I think it's echoed too in the CPR campaign, which got right down through the community, down as far as the primary 7 pupils, such as in my own school. And, you know, whether this is the way money should be raised to finance the health service or not is a philosophical and political question, but I don't think that the people who are out doing the walks and collecting the money and doing the stunts and so on, I don't think they're thinking of that. I think they're thinking of their fellow citizens, and that can be nothing but good for the community.